The briefcase sat on the empty table like a forgotten promise, its black leather surface gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights of the diner at 2 in the morning. Rosalie Kane had been wiping down tables for the past 3 hours, her feet aching in her worn sneakers, her uniform smelling like grease and burnt coffee. She'd noticed the man the moment he walked in. It was impossible not to. He'd been tall, impossibly pale, with hair the color of fresh snow that fell past his shoulders, in a way that should have looked ridiculous, but instead looked regal. His suit had been immaculate, tailored to perfection, and he'd moved with a grace that made her think of predators and poetry in equal measure. He'd ordered nothing but water with lemon, sat in the corner booth for exactly 47 minutes according to the clock on the wall, and then left without a word. The briefcase remained. Rosalie picked it up carefully, feeling the weight of expensive leather and whatever contents lay within. She should have just set it aside for lost and found, let her manager deal with it in the morning. But something about the man had left an impression she couldn't shake. The way his eyes, pale silver, almost colorless, had tracked her movements across the diner. The way he'd sat perfectly still, barely breathing, watching the door like he was waiting for something that never came. She flipped the briefcase over, examining the brass clasps and the fine stitching. That's when she saw it. A small engraved plate on the inside of the handle, partially hidden unless you knew to look. The words were in an elaborate script that seemed to shimmer in the light. Vampire King. Rosalie's breath caught. It had to be some kind of joke, right? A prop for a movie, or maybe he was one of those live-action role players she'd heard about. Except nothing about the man had seemed playful or pretend. Everything about him had felt ancient and dangerous and absolutely real. "You okay, Rosie?" Marcus called from behind the counter, his voice pulling her back to reality. "Yeah, just customer left something. I think I should try to return it." Marcus shrugged, already turning back to his phone. "Your funeral, we close in an hour anyway." The briefcase had no identification tag, no business card tucked into the pockets. But there was something else, a faint scent that clung to the leather. Sandalwood and something darker, something that made her think of old churches and older secrets. She knew it was stupid. She knew she should just leave it. But Rosalie had spent her whole life playing it safe, working double shifts to pay for an apartment she barely spent time in, avoiding risks and adventures like they were contagious. Maybe that's why she found herself checking the reservation book, finding his credit card receipt. The name on it read, Lord Nikolai Draculeshti. The address was in the historic district, in one of those streets that tourists love to photograph but locals avoided after dark. Of course it was. Rosalie's shift ended at 3. By 3:15 she was in her beat-up Honda, the briefcase on the passenger seat beside her, driving through streets slick with recent rain. The address led her to a building that looked like it had been transported from another century, all Gothic spires and dark stone, nestled between modern apartment complexes like a secret from another time. She almost turned around. Almost, but then she was standing in front of the massive wooden door, briefcase in hand, pressing a doorbell that echoed somewhere deep inside the building. Torches flickered in iron sconces on either side of the entrance, actual torches with real fire, which should have been her first clue to run. The door opened silently. A woman stood there, pale as moonlight, with white hair braided in an intricate crown around her head. Her eyes were the color of blood, and her smile showed teeth just a fraction too sharp. "Can I help you?" Her voice was silk and smoke. Rosalie held up the briefcase like a shield. "I am returning this. A customer left it at the diner where I work." This was the address on his credit card. The woman's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her composed expression. "You brought the king's property here yourself? At this hour?" "I just wanted to return it," Rosalie said, suddenly very aware of how stupid this had been. "Is he here, Lord Draculeshti? You know his name?" It wasn't a question. The woman stepped aside, pulling the door wider. "You'd better come in. He'll want to see you." Every instinct Rosalie had screamed at her to refuse, to shove the briefcase into the woman's hands and run. But she found herself stepping across the threshold into a foyer that belonged in a palace. The floors were black marble veined with gold. Chandeliers dripping with crystals cast prismatic light across walls hung with tapestries that looked genuinely medieval. "Wait here," the woman said, then vanished up a curved staircase so quickly it seemed like she'd teleported. Rosalie stood in the entrance, clutching the briefcase, her heart hammering. This was insane. The whole building felt wrong, too quiet, too still, like the air itself was holding its breath. She counted 60 seconds, then 90, then "You came." His voice came from everywhere and nowhere, deep and resonant with an accent she couldn't place. Then he was there at the top of the stairs, and Rosalie understood why her body had gone rigid with instinctive fear. Nikolai Draculeshti looked exactly as he had in the diner, except now there was no pretense of humanity softening his features. His skin was pale as paper, white hair falling loose around his shoulders. He wore black silk that seemed to absorb light, and when he moved down the stairs toward her, it was with a liquid grace that no human could replicate. "You brought my property back personally." He stopped 3 steps from the bottom, towering over her, his silver eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her want to look away, except she couldn't. "Why?" It seemed important, Rosalie managed. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "The engraving. You read it." Another step down, closer now. She could smell sandalwood and something copper underneath. "And yet you came anyway." Most humans would have run or convinced themselves it was a joke. "Is it?" The question came out before she could stop it. "A joke, I mean." Nikolai smiled, and Rosalie saw his teeth perfectly normal except for the canines that were just slightly too long, too sharp. "What do you think, Rosalie Kane?" Her name in his mouth sent shivers down her spine. "How do you your name tag?" He gestured at her chest where her plastic tag still read Rosalie in faded letters. "Though I confess I made note of it earlier. You were kind. You brought me water without judgment when others in your establishment stared. You smiled. That's my job." "No." He descended the final steps, now standing directly in front of her. Up close, she could see that his eyes weren't just silver, they held depths of color like mercury, swirling and shifting. "Your job is to serve food and take orders. Kindness is a choice, one that has become rather rare in this century." Rosalie held out the briefcase between them like a barrier. "Your briefcase, Lord Draculeshti." His long fingers wrapped around the handle, brushing hers in the process. His skin was cool but not cold, smooth as marble. "You honored my property, returned it personally, and showed courage in coming to this place alone. These are not small things, Rosalie Kane." He paused, studying her face. "How did you know where to find me?" "Your credit card receipt." "I know I probably shouldn't have looked, but you did." Something flickered in his expression, approval, maybe, or intrigue. "And now you're here, in the home of what you must suspect I am. Tell me, what do you think I am?" Rosalie's mouth went dry. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was impossible, that vampires weren't real, that this was some elaborate prank or fever dream brought on by too many late shifts. But nothing about this felt fake. Nothing about him felt human. "The briefcase says Vampire King," she whispered. "And you're not. You don't move right. You don't breathe right. Your eyes." "Yes?" He leaned closer and she could see her reflection in those mercury depths. "My eyes? They're not human eyes." "No." He straightened, satisfaction crossing his features. "They're not. And yet you're still standing here, not running, not screaming. Why?" Rosalie didn't have a good answer. She should be terrified. She should be running for the door, calling the police, doing anything except standing in this Gothic mansion with a man who had just tacitly admitted to being a vampire. But beneath the fear was something else, curiosity, maybe, or the reckless hunger for something more that had been building in her for years of monotonous, safe existence. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe I'm tired of pretending the world is smaller than it is. Maybe I've always known there was more, and I just needed proof." Nikolai watched her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Come, you've earned an explanation at the very least, and perhaps," he turned, gesturing toward an open doorway that led deeper into the mansion, "perhaps you've earned more than that. I should go. I have another shift today, actually. In a few hours. You won't sleep anyway." He said it with certainty, like he could read her mind. "Not after this. Not after what you've seen. Come. I promise you safe passage out when we're done talking. On my honor as king." Rosalie followed him, though she couldn't explain why. They walked through corridors lined with portraits of pale figures in ancient clothing, past rooms filled with treasures that belonged in museums. He led her to a study that was all dark wood and leather, with books lining the walls from floor to ceiling, books that looked old enough to crumble at a touch. Nikolai set the briefcase on a massive desk, then turned to face her fully. "Sit, please." She sat in a chair that was probably worth more than her car. He remained standing, a deliberate choice, she thought, keeping the height advantage, the position of power. "You want to know what I am," he said. "The truth is both simpler and more complex than your stories suggest. Yes, I am vampire. I have lived for over 800 years. I require blood to survive. Sunlight would kill me. And yes, I am king, the oldest of my kind, still walking, the one to whom all others in this territory answer. Territory? This city and the surrounding regions. We have our kingdoms just as humans once did. We simply maintain them more discreetly in modern times." He moved to a cabinet, poured something dark red into a crystal glass. The briefcase contains documents, treaties, agreements with other supernatural factions, blood trade records. Information that, in the wrong hands, could start a war. Information I left behind because I was— He paused, seeming to search for the word. "Distracted by what?" His eyes met hers. "By you." The words hung in the air between them. Rosalie felt her heart stutter. "That's ridiculous. You don't even know me." I know you're brave enough to return a vampire king's property personally. I know you're curious enough to follow me into my home. I know you smell like coffee and vanilla and something underneath that's entirely you, something that called to me the moment I walked into that diner." He took a sip in his glass, and Rosalie tried not to think about what it might contain. "I came to your diner because I'd heard whispers of hunters in the area. I was investigating, watching. But then you smiled at me, and I forgot what? Everything. The hunters, the danger, my purpose. For 47 minutes, I sat in that booth and simply watched you exist. Do you understand how rare that is? How impossible? I am king. I am always vigilant, always strategic, always aware, but you made me forget." He set the glass down with deliberate care. "So when you appeared at my door, holding my property, having risked coming to an unknown address alone in the middle of the night, I knew you were either remarkably foolish or remarkably brave. Having spoken with you now, I believe it's the latter." Rosalie's hands gripped the arms of the chair. "What do you want from me?" "Want? Nothing you're not willing to give." He moved closer, crouching down so they were eye level. Up close she could see the fine network of silver veins beneath his pale skin, the way his pupils dilated as he looked at her. "But I would very much like to see you again, properly, without the veil of pretense." "You mean, like a date? You're asking me out?" "I'm asking for your time, your company. The chance to know the woman who showed kindness to a monster and courage in the face of the unknown." His voice dropped lower, more intimate. "I'm asking for the opportunity to show you my world if you're brave enough to see it. This is insane. Yes, you're a vampire. Yes, and you're 800 years old approximately. I stopped counting precisely around century 5. Rosalie laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that echoed in the study. "I should say no. I should walk out of here and pretend this never happened and go back to my normal, boring, safe life." "You should," Nikolai agreed. "It would be the sensible thing to do. But I'm not going to, am I?" His smile was slow, predatory, beautiful. "I very much hope not." They stayed like that for a moment, her sitting, him crouched before her, the space between them charged with possibilities and danger in equal measure. Then Rosalie heard herself say, "Okay, one date, but somewhere neutral, and in the evening I assume you can't do daylight." The sun would indeed be problematic. He rose in one fluid motion, offering his hand. "Tomorrow evening, I'll send a car for you. I can drive myself, I'm sure you can. But allow me this courtesy. Consider it a thank you for returning my property." When she placed her hand in his, he lifted it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that was feather-light and impossibly cold. "Until tomorrow, Rosalie Kane." She left the mansion in a daze, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched. The sky was starting to lighten with pre-dawn gray, and by the time she reached her apartment she was half convinced she'd dreamed the entire thing, except she hadn't. And when she finally collapsed into bed, fully clothed and exhausted, all she could see behind her closed eyelids were mercury silver eyes and a smile that promised everything she'd never dared to want. The next morning, or rather, late afternoon, when she finally woke, there was a single white rose on her doorstep. The note attached was written in elegant old-fashioned script, "Until tonight." Rosalie held the rose carefully, noting its perfection, the way the petals seemed to glow in the dying sunlight. She should have been terrified. She should have been calling someone, telling them about the impossible things she'd encountered. Instead, she found herself standing in front of her closet, trying to figure out what one wore to a date with a vampire king. She settled on a simple black dress that she'd bought on impulse and never had occasion to wear. It was elegant without being flashy, cut to show her curves without being obvious about it. She left her auburn hair down, applied minimal makeup, and tried not to think too hard about what she was doing. The car arrived exactly at sunset. It was a town car, sleek and black with tinted windows, driven by a man who was definitely also a vampire, pale skin, red eyes, that same preternatural stillness. He opened the door for her without a word, and Rosalie slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. They drove through the city as lights began to flicker on, past the downtown district and into the historic quarter, where old buildings huddled together like conspirators. The car pulled up in front of a restaurant Rosalie had never heard of, housed in what looked like a converted church. The stained glass windows glowed from within, casting colored shadows across the street. Nikolai was waiting outside, and Rosalie's breath caught at the sight of him. He wore black again, naturally, but this time his hair was partially pulled back, revealing the sharp planes of his face. He looked like something from a Renaissance painting, beautiful and dangerous and absolutely unreal. "Rosalie." He opened her door himself, offering his hand. "You look exquisite. You clean up pretty well yourself." It was a lame response, but he seemed amused by it, his lips quirking up at the corners. The restaurant was exclusive, no menu that she could see. No other patrons immediately visible. A hostess led them to a private room where a table had been set with candles and flowers that matched the rose he'd left at her door. The walls were original stone, and through a gap in the curtains, Rosalie could see the altar area had been converted into a wine cellar. "A church?" she asked as Nikolai held out her chair. "Former church. It was repurposed in the 1920s. I own the building." He sat across from her, folding his hands on the table. "I thought you might appreciate the irony. Vampires in a church? We're not actually repelled by holy ground, despite what your movies suggest. Faith is powerful, certainly, but architecture itself holds no power over us." A waiter appeared human, Rosalie noted with relief, and set down plates of food that looked like art. "I hope you don't mind that I pre-ordered. I wanted to ensure you'd have something exceptional." The food was incredible, each course more elaborate than the last. Nikolai didn't eat, but he did drink wine. "We can consume some liquids," he explained, and watched her with those intense silver eyes throughout the meal. They talked, and Rosalie was surprised by how easy it was. Nikolai had 8 centuries of stories, but he didn't dominate the conversation. Instead, he asked about her life, her dreams, the small disappointments and quiet hopes she'd never shared with anyone else. He listened with complete attention, like every word she spoke was precious and rare. "You wanted to be a writer," he said at one point, his voice. "What stopped you?" Rosalie pushed a piece of perfect salmon around her plate. "Life, I guess. Student loans, rent, the practical need to survive. Writing doesn't pay bills unless you're one of the lucky ones. But you still write." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Sometimes. Late at night when I can't sleep. Nothing serious. Just stories." "What kind of stories?" She felt her cheeks heat. "Fantasy, mostly. Stories about people finding more than they expected. Adventures, magic, the kind of things that don't exist in real life." Nikolai's expression shifted, something warm entering those cold eyes. "And yet here you are having dinner with a vampire king. Perhaps there's more magic in your real life than you realized." "Maybe." She met his gaze. "Tell me something true. Something you don't usually share." He considered for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass. "I'm tired," he said finally. "Not physically. Vampires don't experience fatigue the way humans do. But emotionally, spiritually, I'm weary. 800 years is a long time to watch the world change, to lose people, to maintain vigilance. Being king is honor and burden in equal measure. Until last night, I couldn't remember the last time I felt truly surprised by anything. And now there's you." He reached across the table, his cool fingers brushing hers. "You surprise me. Rosalie Kane."
You make me want to be surprised.
After dinner, he took her on a walk through the historic district. The streets were quiet at this hour, lit by old-fashioned street lamps that cast pools of amber light. Nikolai walked close to her, not quite touching but near enough that she could feel the cool energy that seemed to radiate from him. "Tell me about vampire society," she said. "If you're king, that means there are others, right? A court? A court, various houses, territorial divisions. Think of it like human government, but older and more ruthless. We have laws, alliances, blood treaties. Some vampires are ancient like me. Others are relatively young, a century or two. We turn humans rarely, and only with permission from the ruling authority. In this case, me. Why rarely? Because new vampires are volatile, dangerous. The bloodlust is difficult to control initially. It takes decades to develop the control I have now. Every vampire I allow to be created is my responsibility, my potential liability." He guided her around a corner onto a street lined with antique shops and galleries. "And because immortality should never be granted lightly. It's a gift and a curse. You watch everyone you love grow old and die. You become a ghost in your own history. It requires a certain kind of strength to endure. Do you regret it? Becoming vampire?" Nikolai stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "No. I was dying when I was turned, a battlefield wound that would have killed me slowly and painfully. A vampire elder found me. Saw something worth saving. She offered me a choice. Die as a human or live forever as something else. I chose life. I've never regretted that choice, though I've often regretted the consequences." "What happened to her? The one who turned you?" "She died 300 years ago. Vampire politics. A faction war that she lost." His voice was carefully neutral, but Rosalie heard the grief underneath. "I avenged her, claimed her territory, built my power. Eventually, I became king of this region. It's what she would have wanted." They walked in silence for a while, Rosalie processing the weight of his history. 800 years of life, of loss, of violence and survival. It should have terrified her, should have sent her running. Instead, she found herself moving closer to him, their shoulders brushing as they walked. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "You could have anyone at all. Why are you interested in a waitress with student loans and faded dreams?" Nikolai stopped in front of an old fountain, its water catching the streetlight in silver streams. "Because you're real," he said. "In a world of masks and pretense, you showed genuine kindness to a stranger. You took a risk to return something that didn't belong to you. You looked at me, truly looked, and didn't flinch away. Do you understand how rare that is? How precious? He turned to her, and in the moonlight his white hair seemed to glow, his pale skin luminous. I've had centuries of admirers, Rosalie. Humans who wanted immortality, vampires who wanted power, everyone wanting something. But you asked for nothing, you expected nothing. You simply were. Kind and brave and curious. That's worth more than all the calculated seduction in the world. Rosalie's heart was hammering again, but not from fear. This is crazy. Completely, he agreed. We barely know each other, true. You're a vampire and I'm human, and this can't possibly work. Likely not. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. His palm was cool against her skin, gentle despite the inhuman strength she knew it contained. But I would very much like to try anyway if you're willing. She should say no. She should be sensible. Protect herself. Go back to her safe, small life. But standing there with his hand on her face, his mercury eyes looking at her like she was something infinitely precious, Rosalie realized she didn't want safe anymore. Yes, she whispered, I'm willing. Nikolai's smile was radiant, transforming his face from beautiful to devastating. Then he was leaning down, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, his lips met hers in a kiss that was cool and soft and perfect. It should have felt wrong kissing someone whose lips held no warmth, whose body was fundamentally different from human. But it didn't. It felt like coming home, like finding something she'd been searching for without knowing it. His hand slid to the back of her neck, his other arm wrapping around her waist, pulling her close as the kiss deepened. When they finally broke apart, Rosalie was breathless and dizzy. Nikolai's eyes had darkened, his pupils blown wide, and she could see the sharp points of his fangs resting against his lower lip. I should take you home, he said, voice rough, before I forget myself entirely. The drive back was quiet, charged with new tension. Nikolai held her hand the entire way, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. When they reached her apartment building, he walked her to the door like a gentleman from another century. Tomorrow? He asked. I have the late shift. I don't get off until midnight. Then I'll come to the diner. We'll go somewhere after. He kissed her hand again, that courtly gesture that made her feel like a princess in a fairy tale. Sleep well, Rosalie Kane. She didn't, of course. She lay awake, replaying every moment, every word, the feeling of his lips on hers. When she finally slept, she dreamed of pale skin and silver eyes, and the feeling of being protected, chosen, wanted in a way she'd never experienced before. The next few weeks passed in a blur of night dates and stolen moments. Nikolai came to the diner every night she worked, sitting in the same corner booth, ordering water with lemon and watching her with undisguised affection. After her shifts, they'd go walking through the city, or he'd take her to vampire establishments, clubs and galleries and theaters that existed in the shadowy spaces between the human world and his. He introduced her to his court, and that was an experience in itself. The vampires were all beautiful in that uncanny way, pale and perfect and ancient. They eyed her with curiosity and barely concealed hunger, but Nikolai's presence kept them respectful, careful. She was the king's chosen, and that afforded her protection and status she didn't fully understand. They think I'm going to turn you, Nikolai told her one night as they sat in his study, her curled against his side on a leather sofa. They're waiting to see if this is a prelude to making you one of us. Rosalie's heart skipped. Is it? That depends entirely on you. His fingers played with her hair, the touch gentle despite his strength. I would never turn you without your explicit consent. Immortality is not a gift to be forced on anyone. But I would be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it. The possibility of having you with me, not for years but for centuries. He trailed off, his expression conflicted. But that's a choice with enormous consequences, one you should never make hastily. Have you turned many people? 7 in 800 years. All are still with me, part of my inner circle. I chose each carefully, turned them for specific reasons: talent, loyalty, strategic value. But also because I cared for them, in various ways. Creating a vampire is intimate. Your blood mingles with theirs, your essence becomes part of them. It's not something I do lightly. Rosalie absorbed this, trying to imagine living forever, watching the world change, existing as something other than human. It was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. I'm not ready for that, not yet, I know, and I'm content to wait, however long it takes. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I've waited 800 years to feel what I feel for you. I can wait a few more decades if needed. But the peace didn't last. It couldn't. Rosalie realized later, not when you were dating the Vampire King and drawing attention from all corners of the supernatural world. The first sign of trouble came in the form of Marcus, her co-worker at the diner. He cornered her during a shift, his expression worried. Rosie, I need to talk to you about the guy you've been seeing, Nikolai. What about him? Marcus glanced around, then pulled her into the kitchen where they had relative privacy. I know what he is. Rosalie's blood went cold. What are you talking about? I'm not an idiot. I've seen things, heard stories. My grandmother was part of let's call it a community. People who know about what's really out there. He gripped her shoulders, his expression urgent. That man is dangerous, Rosalie. He's vampire, and not just any vampire, he's old, powerful. People like him don't date humans for fun. They're using you for something. You're wrong. But her voice shook. Nikolai wouldn't what? Manipulate you? Use you? Rosie, he's had centuries to perfect deception. Whatever you think is happening between you, it's not real. It can't be. He's a predator, and you're prey. Rosalie pulled away, anger surging through her fear. You don't know him. You don't know anything about us. I know enough to be scared for you. Marcus's voice was pleading now. Just be careful, okay? And if you need help, if things go bad, there are people who can protect you. Hunters who specialize in this kind of thing. She left the kitchen shaking, Marcus's words echoing in her head. Was she being naive? Was this all some elaborate game to Nikolai, a king's amusement with a mortal who'd caught his temporary interest? But then he walked in right on schedule, and his face lit up when he saw her. The smile was real. She'd learned to read his expressions over the past weeks. The way he looked at her was real. Whatever this was between them, it wasn't deception. You look troubled, he said when she brought him his water. His hand caught hers, cool fingers wrapping around her wrist. What's wrong? Not here. After my shift? Concern flickered across his features. Of course, I'll wait. When her shift ended, they went to his mansion instead of their usual haunts. In the privacy of his study, Rosalie told him about Marcus's warning, about hunters and the implication that she was being used. Nikolai's expression went cold in a way she'd never seen before, not angry at her, but at the threat implicit in Marcus's words. Hunters, he said quietly. That explains the activity I've been sensing lately. They must be monitoring my movements, saw us together, and decided you were either a target or a way to get to me. Are you using me? The question came out smaller than she intended. Is this real, or am I just something temporary to pass the time? In an instant, he was in front of her, his hands framing her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me very carefully. You are not temporary. You are not a game or a distraction. What I feel for you is more real than anything I've experienced in centuries. I am 800 years old, Rosalie. I have had lovers, companions, people I cared for, but what I feel for you. He paused, and she saw vulnerability flash across his face. It terrifies me, because for the first time in lifetimes I have something to lose. Then we're in danger. If hunters are watching, let them watch, let them try. His voice was steel and ice. I am king. I have survived wars, inquisitions, vampire hunters far more skilled than whatever faction is operating now, and I will not let anyone harm you. I swear it on my crown, on every year of my existence. He pulled her into an embrace, and Rosalie felt the tension vibrating through his frame, not fear but rage, protective fury at the implied threat to her safety. I'll assign you guards, he said into her hair. Subtle ones but present, and I'll deal with these hunters. They'll learn that threatening what's mine is a fatal mistake. I don't want anyone hurt because of me, and I don't want you hurt at all. He pulled back, his expression fierce. You are under my protection now, Rosalie. That means something in my world. It means anyone who touches you answers to me. Anyone who threatens you faces the full weight of my power. Do you understand? She nodded, overwhelmed by the intensity of his protection, the absoluteness of his claim. He meant every word. She could see it in the hardness of his eyes, the set of his jaw. Nikolai would burn down the world to keep her safe. Stay here tonight, he said. I'll have your things brought over tomorrow, but tonight I need you here where I know you're secure. Rosalie agreed, and he led her to a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment. The bed was massive, draped in black silk, and through the windows she could see the city light sparkling in the distance. Rest, Nikolai said. I have calls to make, security to arrange. I'll be nearby if you need me. But before he could leave, Rosalie caught his hand. Stay just for a while. Something softened in his expression. He sat on the edge of the bed and she curled against him, her head on his shoulder. His arm wrapped around her, solid and cool, and despite everything, the danger, the fear, the impossibility of it all, she felt safe. I'm falling in love with you, she whispered. Is that stupid? His arm tightened around her. If it is, then we're both fools. Because I fell in love with you the moment you smiled at me in that diner and treated me like I was worth kindness. They stayed like that until she drifted off, and when she woke hours later, he was still there, watching over her with silver eyes that held centuries of devotion. The hunter attack came 3 nights later. Rosalie was at the diner. Nikolai had wanted her to stay home, but she'd insisted on maintaining some normalcy. His guards were present, she knew, hidden among the late-night customers. Everything seemed fine until the door burst open, and 5 people stormed in wearing tactical gear and carrying weapons that gleamed with silver. Everyone out! One of them shouted, a woman with short cropped hair and eyes like ice. Now! The diner emptied in seconds, customers and staff fleeing into the night, except for Rosalie, frozen behind the counter, and the 3 vampires who'd been posing as customers. They moved with liquid speed, placing themselves between Rosalie and the hunters. "You're protecting her?" The lead hunter looked disgusted. "A human willing to whore herself out to monsters?" "Watch your mouth," one of the vampires hissed Celine, one of Nikolai's inner circle. "You speak of the king's chosen, the king's pet, you mean? We're here to deliver a message." The hunter pulled out a wicked-looking crossbow, the bolt gleaming silver. "Tell your king that his reign is over. Tell him we're coming for him, and when we're done, every vampire in this city will be dust." Before anyone could react, she fired. The bolt flew past the vampires, aimed directly at Rosalie's chest. Time seemed to slow. Rosalie saw the bolt coming, knew she couldn't move fast enough, felt terror flood her system. Then Celine was there, impossibly fast, knocking Rosalie to the ground. The bolt hit the wall behind where she'd been standing, embedding deep in the drywall. The diner erupted into violence. The vampires moved like storms, all speed and fury. But the hunters were prepared, armed with silver weapons and what looked like holy water grenades. Rosalie huddled behind the counter, her ears ringing from the sounds of fighting snarls and shouts and the crash of breaking furniture. Then Nikolai was there. She felt him before she saw him, a surge of cold power that made the air pressure drop and her ears pop. He came through the door like vengeance incarnate, white hair streaming behind him, eyes glowing silver white with rage. His mere presence made the hunters freeze, instinctive fear overriding their training. "You dared," he said, voice resonating with otherworldly power. "You dared to threaten her." The lead hunter tried to raise her crossbow, but Nikolai moved faster than sight. One moment he was at the door, the next he had her by the throat, lifting her off her feet with one hand. "Your message is received," he said, voice like winter death. "Here is mine. Leave this city. Leave this territory. If I see any of you again, I will not be merciful. I will not be quick. I will make your deaths last centuries." He threw her through the front window, not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to hurt. The other hunters scrambled after her, grabbing their fallen comrade and fleeing into the night. Nikolai turned to the vampires, his expression still hard. "Sweep the perimeter, make sure they're gone, and find out how they knew to come here tonight when Rosalie was vulnerable." Then he was beside her, helping her up, his hands running over her arms and face checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "I'm fine. Celine saved me." Rosalie was shaking, adrenaline crashing through her system. "They wanted to kill me, to get to you, I know." His jaw was tight, fury still radiating from him. "This is my fault. I should have been here. I should have. You can't be everywhere at once." She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "This isn't your fault. They're hunters. This is what they do. Not anymore. Not in my city." He pulled her close, and she felt the tremor in his frame, rage, fear, the terrifying strength of his protective instinct. "I'm ending this tonight. They wanted to deliver a message. I'll deliver one they'll never forget." Over the next week, Nikolai went to war. It was subtle, shadow work that Rosalie only saw pieces of, but the effects were clear. Hunter safe houses were raided, weapons caches destroyed, key members disappeared into the night. Nikolai was ruthless, efficient, and absolutely merciless in protecting what was his. Rosalie moved into the mansion fully, her apartment abandoned for the safety of Nikolai's domain. She should have felt like a prisoner, trapped by circumstance and supernatural politics. Instead, she felt more alive than ever before. Living with Nikolai meant seeing him in all his facets, the king conducting business with cold efficiency, the ancient creature practicing centuries-old rituals, and the man who looked at her like she was his entire world. They spent nights talking, walking through his private gardens, making love with a passion that left her breathless and dizzy. He was careful with her, always aware of his strength, his fangs. But there was an intensity to his touch that spoke of barely controlled need, the vampire instinct to claim and possess warring with his determination to keep her safe. "I want to taste you," he confessed one night as they lay tangled in his bed. His lips were against her throat, feeling the pulse of her blood. "Not to feed, I don't need human blood the way younger vampires do, but to know you completely, to have that connection." Rosalie's heart hammered. She should be terrified by the idea of those fangs piercing her skin. Instead, she found herself tilting her head, offering access. "Then taste me, Rosalie, I trust you," and she did, absolutely. "I want this. I want you to have all of me." His lips traced the line of her jugular, reverent and slow. Then she felt the sharp pressure of his fangs, a brief sting, and then pleasure, unlike anything she'd ever experienced. It flooded her system, warm and overwhelming, as she felt him draw gently at her throat. The sensation was intimate beyond words, his mouth on her skin, her blood flowing into him, mingling them together in a way that felt sacred. When he pulled back, his eyes were glowing, his lips stained with her blood. He looked wild, beautiful, dangerous. Then he was kissing her, And she could taste copper and something else, the essence of him, ancient and powerful. Mine, he whispered against her mouth. You're mine, Rosalie Kane. Body, blood, soul. Mine. Yours, she agreed and meant it, but the hunters weren't finished. They'd been planning something larger, she realized, when Nikolai came to her one evening with an expression of grim determination. They're going to attack the court, he said, during the eclipse gathering next week. Every vampire of status in the territory will be in one place, and they're planning to use some kind of weapon, something that can kill multiple vampires at once. How do you know? We captured one of their scouts. He talked. Nikolai's expression was cold, and Rosalie decided not to ask for details. I'm calling off the gathering. It's too dangerous. Won't that make you look weak? Like you're backing down? He grimaced. Yes, which is exactly what I can't afford. There are vampires in my court who already question my judgment specifically regarding you. If I cancel the gathering, it will be seen as putting my human lover above the welfare of vampire society. Rosalie's stomach dropped. So what are you going to do? Set a trap. His smile was sharp, predatory. Let them think they're walking into a gathering of vulnerable vampires. Instead, they'll find a king and his entire military force ready and waiting. That's dangerous. Everything about my existence is dangerous. But I'm 800 years old, Rosalie. I've survived this long by being smarter and more ruthless than my enemies. He cupped her face, his expression softening. I need you safe during this. I'm sending you to a secure location with guards. You'll be protected while I handle the hunters. No. He blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. No, we're in this together. If you're putting yourself at risk, I want to be there. Maybe I can help somehow. Absolutely not. You're human, Rosalie. You'd be vulnerable, a liability in combat. His words stung, though she knew he was right. Fine, but I'm staying in the mansion, not some secure location where I'll go crazy worrying about you. He looked like he wanted to argue, but finally nodded. The mansion. But you stay in the secure rooms with guards. You don't leave, you don't take risks. Promise me. I promise. The night of the eclipse gathering arrived with ominous weight. Nikolai, dressed in formal clothing that looked like it belonged in a different century, black silk embroidered with silver thread, his white hair braided with silver chains. He looked every inch the king, beautiful and terrible and absolutely regal. Before he left, he came to her room where she was being guarded by Celine and two other vampires. He kissed her deeply, desperately, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. If something happens, nothing will happen, Rosalie insisted. You're going to destroy them, come back here, and we're going to celebrate. And if I don't, then I'll march into whatever afterlife vampires have and drag you back myself. She tried to make it sound light, but her voice cracked. Come back to me, Nikolai, always. He pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, Rosalie Kane. Whatever happens tonight, know that I love you too. Now go be the terrifying vampire king and remind everyone why they should fear you. He left and the waiting began. The secure room was deep in the mansion's lower levels, reinforced and spelled with protections Rosalie didn't understand. Celine and the guards were tense, listening to communications through earpieces, reporting the situation in terse updates. The hunters arrived at the gathering location right on schedule. 50 of them, heavily armed, ready for war. They breached the building expecting to find vampires in formal dress, vulnerable and grouped together. Instead, they found 200 vampires in full combat formation, led by a king who'd been fighting wars for 8 centuries. The battle was brutal, fast, decisive. Through the security feeds, Rosalie watched Nikolai move through the hunters like death incarnate. He was terrifying in combat, all speed and strength and cold precision. The hunters didn't stand a chance. It should have been over quickly. Except one group of hunters had split off, Celine reported with growing alarm. They weren't at the gathering. They were heading toward the mansion. They know she's here, Celine said, already moving. They're coming for the king's chosen. If they kill her, she didn't finish, but Rosalie understood. If she died, Nikolai would be devastated, vulnerable. It was a strategic strike at the heart of his power. How many? Rosalie asked, trying to keep her voice steady. 10. Maybe more. Celine's expression was grim. We can hold them off, but... She glanced at the other guards, clearly calculating odds she didn't like. Send for help. Tell Nikolai he's already on his way. But he's across the city. It'll take him 10 minutes, maybe 15. 10 minutes. A lifetime in a battle. Rosalie looked around the secure room, reinforced walls, one entrance, no windows. They were trapped here, sitting ducks, waiting for hunters who specialized in killing vampires. Then we make those 10 minutes count, she said. The first explosion rocked the mansion. Then shouting, the sounds of fighting echoing through the corridors. The hunters were inside. Celine and her guards formed a barrier in front of Rosalie, their fangs extended, eyes glowing with combat fury. The door to the secure room was reinforced, but Rosalie could hear the hunters working on it, power tools and what sounded like explosives. "This is where we hold," Celine said grimly. "For the king, for his chosen, we hold." The door blew inward in a shower of splinters and smoke. Hunters poured through, and the secure room became a war zone. Rosalie had never seen vampires truly fight before, not like this. Not when they were protecting something they considered sacred. Celine moved like lightning, ripping weapons from hands, her strength inhuman. The guards were equally brutal, fighting with fangs and claws and desperate ferocity. But the hunters were prepared. They had silver, they had fire, they had numbers. One by one the guards fell, wounded or dusted or driven back. Then the lead hunter, the same woman from the diner, was standing in front of Rosalie, crossbow raised, smile victorious. "The king's whore," she said. "You've been hard to get alone. He keeps you protected like you're something precious. But you're just a human. Weak, worthless, and when he finds your body, when he sees what we've done, it'll break him. That's when we'll strike." She raised the crossbow, aimed at Rosalie's heart, and fired. Rosalie closed her eyes, waiting for the impact. Instead, she felt a rush of Arctic air, heard the hunter scream, and opened her eyes to see Nikolai standing in front of her. He'd caught the bolt mid-flight, his hand wrapped around the silver shaft, his other hand was around the hunter's throat, lifting her off her feet. His eyes were pure, glowing white, power radiating from him in visible waves. "You tried to kill her," he said, voice resonating with inhuman rage. "You broke into my home, you threatened what is mine, and now you will die." The hunter's scream was cut off as Nikolai tore out her throat with his fangs, brutal and savage and absolute. He dropped her body and turned to the other hunters, his face a mask of blood and fury. They ran. The ones who could still move fled, and Nikolai let them go, not out of mercy, but because every second he chased them was a second away from Rosalie. The moment the last hunter was gone, he was beside her, pulling her into his arms, his hands shaking as they ran over her body, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "Rosalie, answer me, I'm fine." She wrapped her arms around him, feeling the tremors running through his frame. "I'm okay, you got here in time." He held her so tightly she could barely breathe, his face buried in her hair, and she realized he was terrified, truly, deeply afraid in a way that had nothing to do with his own safety. "I almost lost you," he whispered. "I felt the moment they breached the mansion and I ran. I've never moved so fast in my life, never pushed my body so hard. And still, I almost wasn't fast enough. But you were." She pulled back, cupping his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You were fast enough. I'm here. I'm safe. Because of you." He kissed her then, desperate and claiming, and she tasted blood on his lips, the hunter's blood, the violence he'd committed to keep her safe. She should have been repulsed. Instead, she kissed him back harder, pouring every ounce of love and trust and acceptance into it. When they finally broke apart, Celine was watching with an expression that might have been approval. "The hunters are routed," she reported. "The ones that survived are fleeing the city. It's over." "Not yet." Nikolai's voice was steel. "Hunt down every remaining hunter in my territory. I want them gone, driven out, or destroyed, I don't care which. Make it clear that this city, this territory is mine. And anyone who threatens what's mine pays the ultimate price." "Yes, my king." Celine bowed and left, the other vampires following to carry out his orders. Alone in the ruined secure room, Nikolai pulled Rosalie close again, his forehead pressed to hers. "I can't lose you," he said quietly. "I've lost so many people over the centuries, makers, companions, friends. But losing you would end me. Do you understand? It would break something in me that 800 years couldn't heal. Then turn me." The words came out before Rosalie could second-guess them. "Make me vampire. Make me immortal. Give me the power to protect myself, to stand beside you as an equal instead of a weakness for your enemies to exploit." He went very still. "You don't know what you're asking." "I do. You explained it weeks ago. The bloodlust, the changes. Watching everyone I know die while I stay young. I understand, Nikolai, and I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you, Rosalie. I love you. I want forever with you, however long forever is for vampires. I want to be your equal, your partner, not just the human you have to constantly protect." She met his mercury eyes steadily. "Turn me, tonight, now. Before I lose my nerve." He searched her face for a long moment, looking for doubt, for hesitation. When he found none, something shifted in his expression, resolve mixed with fierce joy. "If I do this, there's no going back. You'll be vampire forever. You'll be bound to me in ways that go beyond human marriage. You'll be mine completely, and I'll be yours." "I know. I want that, then yes." He kissed her softly, reverently. "Yes, I'll turn you. I'll give you immortality. I'll give you everything." They went to his private chambers, the most secure room in the mansion. He explained the process carefully, his blood in her system, enough to trigger the change, but not so much it overwhelmed her human body. Then her death, quick and as painless as he could make it. Then the awakening, the transformation, the rebirth as something new. It will hurt, he warned. The change is agonizing. Every cell in your body will be rewritten, transformed. You'll die and come back as something else. I'll be with you through all of it, but I can't spare you the pain. I wish I could. I can handle pain. She lay back on his bed, trying to steady her racing heart. I can handle anything if it means eternity with you. Nikolai cut his wrist with one sharp fang, held it to her lips. Drink as much as you can. His blood was cold and thick, tasting of copper and something indefinable, power maybe, or ancient magic. Rosalie drank until he pulled away, until her vision started to blur and her body felt strange, disconnected. Now comes the hard part, he said softly, cradling her against his chest. I'm sorry, my love, I'm so sorry. She felt his fangs pierce her throat, felt him begin to drink. It should have felt like the gentle pleasure of before, but this was different, deeper, more draining. He was taking her life, drawing it out with each pull of her blood. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. Her heartbeat slowed, stuttered, stopped. The last thing she felt was Nikolai's arms around her, his voice whispering, "Come back to me, come back, Rosalie." Then nothing. The pain came first, agony unlike anything Rosalie had imagined, like her bones were breaking and reforming, her organs liquefying and crystallizing. She would have screamed if she could have drawn breath, but her lungs weren't working, her body wasn't responding. Then, gradually, awareness returned. Her senses were different, sharper, clearer, overwhelming in their intensity. She could hear Nikolai's breath, hear his heart beating slow and steady. She could smell everything, the fabric of the sheets, the stone of the mansion, the complex scent of his skin. She opened her eyes and the world was different. Colors were more vivid, details more precise. She could see individual dust motes floating in the air, could count the threads in the tapestries on the walls. "Rosalie?" Nikolai's voice was cautious, hopeful. "Can you hear me?" She turned her head, the movement impossibly smooth and fast, and looked at him. Really looked. She could see the network of vessels beneath his pale skin, could see the subtle shifts of his expression, could feel the power that radiated from him like heat from a fire. "I can hear everything," she whispered, and even her own voice sounded different, richer, more resonant. "I can feel everything. How do you feel? The bloodlust, is it overwhelming?" Rosalie took inventory of herself. There was hunger, yes, a deep, gnawing need that made her throat burn. But it wasn't uncontrollable, wasn't the mindless frenzy she'd been warned about. It was simply there, a fact of her new existence. "I'm hungry," she admitted. "But I'm in control." Relief flooded his features. "That's good. That's very good. The fact that you have control this early suggests you'll be strong, powerful. My blood gave you that, an elder's power, instead of a fledgling's weakness." He helped her stand, and Rosalie marveled at the ease of movement, the strength in her limbs. She felt like she could tear through walls, run faster than sight, do anything. "Come, look at yourself." He led her to a full-length mirror, and Rosalie gasped at her reflection. Her skin was pale now, white as snow, luminous in the low light. Her hair, previously auburn, had lightened to a platinum blonde with hints of rose gold. Her eyes were the most striking change. They were silver now, like Nikolai's, but with swirls of violet in the depths. "You're beautiful," Nikolai said, his voice rough with emotion. "You were beautiful before, but now, you're magnificent." She turned to him, seeing him with her new vampire sight, and understood what he meant. He was perfect, every line and angle, the play of light on his white hair, the ancient power in his eyes. They matched now, two creatures of the night, equal and eternal. "I love you," she said, "more than I could ever express." He pulled her close, kissing her with a passion that no longer felt dangerous or restrained. They were equals now, both vampire, both powerful. His hands roamed her body with new confidence, and she responded with strength that matched his own. They made love in the soft darkness, two immortal creatures discovering each other anew. It was different now, more intense, more consuming. She could feel his emotions through their blood bond, could sense his pleasure and his love, and his overwhelming relief that she'd survived the transformation. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Nikolai traced patterns on her pale skin. "You'll need to feed soon. The transformation burns through energy quickly, and you'll need blood to stabilize." "Will I have to kill?" The question had been weighing on her. "No. We have blood banks, donated human blood from willing participants. Some vampires prefer to hunt, but it's not necessary for survival. You'll never have to take a life unless you choose to." Relief flooded through her. She was vampire now, immortal and all-powerful, but she didn't want to lose her humanity entirely. Knowing she could exist without being a monster mattered more than she could say. Over the following weeks, Rosalie learned what it meant to be vampire. Nikolai taught her control, how to manage the bloodlust, how to use her new speed and strength. She discovered she had an affinity for mental abilities, telepathy, and minor compulsion that Nikolai said were rare gifts. "You're strong," he told her proudly. "Stronger than most vampires are after decades. My blood gave you power, but your will made you what you are." The vampire court accepted her quickly, especially once they understood she was no longer Nikolai's human weakness but his immortal partner. Celine became her closest friend, teaching her vampire politics and the subtle rules of their society. The hunters never returned. Word spread quickly about what happened to those who threatened the vampire king and his chosen. The city became peaceful, secure in Nikolai's rule. Rosalie kept writing, though her stories took on new depth now that she understood the supernatural world from the inside. She published her first novel under a pseudonym, a love story between a vampire and a human that felt deliciously ironic given her own history. Life, or rather, eternal existence, settled into a new rhythm. Nights spent with Nikolai, exploring the city or traveling to other vampire territories. Nights at court, learning to navigate immortal politics. Nights in his bed, discovering every facet of their connection. 5 years passed, then 10. Rosalie watched the world change while she remained young, beautiful, powerful. She watched technology advance, fashions shift, the city grow and evolve. And through it all, Nikolai was beside her, constant, devoted, her partner in every way that mattered. "Do you regret it?" he asked one evening as they stood on the balcony of his mansion, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors they both had to admire from the safety of shadow. "Becoming vampire? Giving up your human life?" Rosalie turned to him, taking in the sight of him illuminated by dying light, white hair glowing, silver eyes soft with love, his face showing every bit of his 8 centuries of existence and his eternal devotion to her. "Never," she said firmly. "Every choice I made led me here, to you, to this life. I'd make the same choices 1,000 times over." He pulled her close, kissing her temple. "I spent 800 years alone, Rosalie. 800 years of existence without understanding what I was missing. Then you smiled at me in a diner, returned my briefcase, and changed everything. You made me feel alive again. You made immortality worth living. You saved me," she countered, "from a small life, from never knowing what I was capable of. You showed me magic and danger and love beyond anything I'd imagined. You gave me forever." They stood together as the sun finally set, 2 immortal creatures watching the stars emerge overhead. Somewhere in the city, life continued, humans going about their business, unaware of the supernatural world existing alongside their own. Unaware that a vampire king and his queen stood watch, protecting their territory, ruling with strength and wisdom accumulated over centuries. "What do you want to do tonight?" Nikolai asked, his arms secure around her waist. Rosalie smiled, her fangs catching the light. "Everything. I want to do everything with you. Tonight, tomorrow, forever." "Forever," he agreed. "I can work with forever." They went inside hand in hand, the night stretching before them full of endless possibility. Behind them the city glowed with light and life. Ahead of them eternity waited, not lonely or frightening, but full of love and adventure and the secure knowledge that they'd found their perfect match. Rosalie Kane had once been a waitress with faded dreams and a safe, small life. She'd returned a forgotten briefcase to a mysterious customer and discovered a whole new world. She'd fallen in love with a vampire king, been transformed into his immortal equal, and found a home in the darkness. Some people spent their whole lives searching for meaning, for connection, for something more. Rosalie had found all of that and more in the silver eyes of an 800-year-old vampire who'd been waiting centuries for someone to see him, truly see him, and love him anyway. They had forever stretching ahead of them, full of nights and shadows and the kind of love that transcended mortality itself. And if that wasn't a perfect ending, Rosalie couldn't imagine what would be. Years to continue to pass, decades blurring together in the way they did for immortals. Rosalie grew into her power, becoming a force in vampire society in her own right. She advised Nikolai on matters of state, helped negotiate treaties with other supernatural factions, and became known throughout their world as the queen who'd chosen her crown rather than being born to it. They traveled the world together, visiting ancient vampire strongholds in Europe, hidden courts in Asia, meeting other immortals and learning the vast complexity of supernatural politics. Every experience was new through Rosalie's eyes, and Nikolai found himself seeing the world differently, through her perspective, with wonder renewed, with appreciation for beauty he'd stopped noticing centuries ago. On their 50th anniversary, measured from the night she'd walked into his mansion with his forgotten briefcase, Nikolai threw a celebration that brought vampires from across the globe to their territory. The mansion was transformed into something from a fairy tale, all candlelight and music and vampires in their finest formal wear. Rosalie wore a gown of deep purple silk that complemented her pale skin and silver-violet eyes. Diamonds glittered at her throat, a gift from Nikolai, of course, who loved adorning her with beautiful things. She moved through the crowd with confidence, greeting ancient vampires who'd initially scorned her humanity but now respected her power and wisdom. "You've done well for yourself," Celine commented, appearing at her side with 2 glasses of wine, regular wine, not blood, though vampires could consume both. From waitress to vampire queen in 5 decades. That's quite a trajectory. Rosalie laughed, accepting the glass. When you put it that way, it sounds absurd. Most love stories worth telling are absurd. Celine's red eyes were warm with genuine affection. You're good for him, you know. I've served Nikolai for 300 years, and I've never seen him as happy as he's been since you. You remind him how to be something other than king. You remind him how to simply be. He did the same for me. Reminded me I could be more than what I'd settled for. They watched Nikolai across the room, deep in conversation with a delegation from the European courts. Even among vampires, he stood out regal bearing, that white hair and those mercury eyes, the aura of absolute authority. But when his gaze found Rosalie across the crowd, his whole expression softened, transformed by love. He excused himself from the delegation and made his way to her, offering his hand. Dance with me? The ballroom floor cleared as they moved to the center, other vampires stepping back to give their king and queen space. Music swelled a waltz from centuries past, played by vampires who remembered when it was first written. Nikolai swept Rosalie into the dance with the grace of someone who'd been doing this for 800 years. They moved in perfect synchronization, her vampire reflexes matching his, their bodies in tune after decades of partnership. Happy? He murmured, his lips close to her ear. Deliriously, she leaned into him, feeling the cool solidity of his body against hers. Though I still sometimes can't believe this is my life, that I get to have you for eternity. Believe it, you're mine, Rosalie Draculesti, and I'm yours. Nothing will ever change that. Not time, not politics, not anything existence throws at us. He spun her out and back in, the movement graceful and sure. I love you more than I did yesterday, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today. That's the gift of immortality. The love doesn't fade. It only grows deeper, richer, more essential. Poetic for a vampire king. I'm allowed to be poetic with my queen. His smile was warm, genuine, nothing like the cold mask he showed the court. You bring it out in me. The dance ended, and they separated to mingle with their guests, playing the roles of host and hostess, king and queen. But throughout the night their eyes found each other across the room, silent communication and unspoken love passing between them. Near dawn, when the celebration finally ended and the last guests departed, they stood alone in the now quiet ballroom. Candles guttered, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten with approaching sunrise time for all vampires to seek shelter from the deadly daylight. Come, Nikolai said, taking her hand. I have something to show you. He led her to a part of the mansion she'd never seen before, a hidden wing accessible only through a secret door in his study. They descended stairs that went deep underground, past protective wards and security measures that would keep out anyone without permission. At the bottom was a chamber unlike anything Rosalie had seen. The walls were crystal, shot through with veins of gold that caught and reflected the light from enchanted lanterns. In the center stood 2 ornate coffins, not the grotesque boxes from horror movies, but beautiful works of art, carved from black wood and inlaid with silver. For us, Nikolai explained. A place where we can rest during the day, completely secure, completely safe. I had them made shortly after I turned you, but I wanted to wait for the right moment to show you. Rosalie approached the coffins, running her fingers over the intricate carvings. One was decorated with roses and thorns, the other with crowns and swords. They're beautiful. They're practical. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. As we age, as we grow more powerful, we'll need secure places to rest. This chamber is warded against intrusion, protected by magic and technology both. Here, we can sleep without fear, knowing we're safe. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. You think of everything. I've had 800 years to learn caution. His expression grew serious. But also, I've learned what's worth protecting. And you, Rosalie, you're worth every precaution, every safeguard, every measure I can take to ensure you're safe. They kissed in the crystal chamber, surrounded by the evidence of his planning and his love. When they finally broke apart, the sky above ground was fully light, the sun shining on a world they couldn't safely inhabit for another 12 hours. Shall we test our new accommodations? Nikolai asked, gesturing to the coffins. It should have been creepy, climbing into a coffin to sleep. Instead, Rosalie found it oddly comfortable, the silk-lined interior perfectly molded to her body. The lid closed, sealing her in protective darkness, and she felt the pull of day sleep tugging at her consciousness. Through their blood bond, she felt Nikolai beside her in his own coffin, felt his love and contentment. They drifted off together, 2 immortal creatures resting in perfect security, knowing they'd wake at sunset to another night together. Decades turned to centuries. Rosalie watched technology advance beyond anything she could have imagined in her human life. The internet gave way to more advanced networks, cities transformed, humanity reached for the stars. Through it all, the supernatural world adapted, evolved, maintained its secrecy while navigating an increasingly connected world. She and Nikolai became legends among vampire kind, the king who'd ruled for over a millennium, and the queen who'd chosen immortality for love rather than power. Their territory remained peaceful, prosperous, a beacon of stability in the often chaotic vampire world. They faced challenges, of course. There were always ambitious vampires seeking to claim power, occasional hunter factions that needed to be dealt with, political complications with other supernatural species. But they handled everything together, partners in the truest sense. On the 200th anniversary of Rosalie's transformation, they stood on the same balcony, where they'd watched countless sunsets from the safety of shadow. The city had changed, taller buildings, different lights, new technology, but the mansion remained, an anchor point of permanence in an ever-changing world. Do you miss it? Nikolai asked. Your human life? The sun? Aging with your friends? Rosalie considered the question carefully. She'd long ago made peace with her choice, but it was worth examining honestly. Sometimes I miss the sun, she admitted. I miss afternoon coffee shops and beach days. I miss the simplicity of human concerns. But I wouldn't trade this for anything. This life with you, this power, this understanding of how vast and magical the world really is. She took his hand, their pale fingers intertwining. I've lived 200 years as a vampire and 24 as a human. The human years gave me life, but the vampire years gave me existence worth living. You gave me that. He pulled her close, and they stood together in their customary pose, immortal rulers watching over their domain. I love you, Rosalie, more than I have words to express, even after all these centuries together. I know, I feel it every moment through our bond. She smiled up at him, her fangs catching the moonlight. And I love you just as much. Forever doesn't seem long enough, but it's what we have. So let's make it count, forever, he agreed. And every moment in it. They went inside as night deepened, returning to the life they'd built together. There was court business to attend to, treaties to negotiate, the endless work of ruling their territory. But there was also time for themselves, for love and laughter, for exploration and adventure, for simply existing together in comfortable silence, the mansion filled with their shared history. Rooms they'd made love in, halls where they'd danced, studies where they'd planned and plotted and dreamed. Every corner held memories, decades and centuries of accumulated moments that formed the tapestry of their immortal life together. Rosalie never forgot how it started, a forgotten briefcase, a kind gesture, a reckless decision to follow curiosity into the unknown. She'd been a waitress with student loans and faded dreams, working late shifts and playing it safe. Then she'd met a vampire king and everything changed. Some nights, when she was alone in her study writing, she'd never given up writing. Even after all these years, she'd take out a small object she kept in a locked drawer. The credit card receipt from that first night, Nikolai's name written in elegant script, the proof that once upon a time her whole world had fit in a greasy diner, and the dangerous decision to return property to a stranger. That piece of paper had led her here to immortality, to love, to a life beyond anything she'd imagined. It reminded her that the best choices were often the reckless ones, that safety was overrated, and that sometimes the most dangerous decisions led to the most beautiful outcomes. She kept it as a reminder, as a talisman, as evidence that fairy tales could be real if you were brave enough to believe in them. And, when Nikolai found her holding it one night, caught in memories and reflection, he simply wrapped his arms around her and held her close. Because he understood. He'd been waiting 800 years for someone to take that chance, to see past the danger to the person underneath, to choose him, despite everything. They'd found each other across the divide of species and circumstance, and they'd built something eternal together. That was worth more than all the power, all the immortality, all the supernatural abilities in the world. They had each other. They had forever. And in the end, that was everything. The night stretched ahead of them, full of possibility and promise. Together they walked into it, king and queen, vampire and vampire, partners in eternity. Behind them, their past spread out in centuries of shared history. Ahead of them, the future waited, endless and unknown and theirs to claim. And somewhere in the city they ruled, a new waitress worked a late shift, serving coffee to strangers, playing it safe, never imagining what might walk through the door and change everything. But that was a different story for a different night. This story, Rosalie and Nikolai's story, had reached its perfect ending. Not an ending that meant their story was over, but the kind of ending that promised infinite continuance. The kind of ending where happily ever after wasn't just a phrase but a lived reality, earned through courage and choice and unwavering love. They had forever, and they intended to make every moment of it count.